Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode at the Inner Changemaker podcast. This is the show to help you become the most effective version of yourself in the moments that matter the most. And every single week, I want to bring to you guys the best possible humans that I can get my hands on, whether they're successful businessmen or great published authors. And this week is no different. We have my guest today. He's actually accompanied more than 1,000 people through the intimate process of dying. And we're going to deep dive on that. He's also an internationally respected Buddhist teacher, as well as the co-founder of the Zen Hospice project, which I did a bit of digging, was the first Buddhist hospice in America, which I'm sure we'll touch on. He's also the founder of the Metta Institute. His work has been featured in a PBS series called On Our Own Terms. It's been highlighted in the Oprah Winfrey Show, and he's also the author of the 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. So Frank Ostaseski, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Jay. Really happy to be with you. And nice to have a chance to have a real conversation with people about an issue that really matters to us.
Yeah. And Frank, I know we were talking a little just like off record. And sometimes, when you look at, life and death, and there's just so much emotion, that goes into that conversation without even saying anything. Sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think part of what it is that when we even use the word death, when we bring it into the room, so to speak,
right,
it gets our attention, right? And it galvanizes our attention into this moment, into what's happening right here, right now. And that's part of its wisdom. That's part of what it can show us about our life, that the only place we can really make any change in our life is right here, right now, right?
I love that you say that, because it is all in the moment, right? Like every moment, present moment, that's the only thing that we can change. And I love that even in your book, I believe one of the first invitations was, I think the first one, don't wait.
Yeah, right? Don't
wait. And I love that. So before we dive into all this, because I can already tell this is going to be a great, great interview, a great conversation. How did, I honestly try to avoid this type of question, especially in the beginning, but when someone has kind of the resume and they're in the line of work that you've been a part of, whether, they're speaking internationally on these topics, you're a successful author. Like, how did you get started in this line of work? Like, how did you get to the point where you're accompanying over 1,000 people through that amazing ceremony of passing of life?
Yeah, I mean, who picks this, right? I mean, who chooses to go spend their day being with people who are dying?
Yeah, like Frank, what did you major in? I'm just trying.
So I mean, honestly, I began in my own family. Both my parents died when I was quite young. I was 16 when my mom died. My dad died a few years later. So, death and I had an early relationship. We got to know each other quite early. I worked in refugee camps in southern Mexico and Central America, where I saw a lot of horrible dying, And then I came back to San Francisco, and the AIDS epidemic was just exploding in San Francisco. We had 30,000 people die in San Francisco, 30,000 people. And so it's hard to imagine, these numbers, but it was massive. And of course, none of us knew what we were doing. We were making it up as we went along, There wasn't the kinds of services that exist now. So all of those things were factors, in my getting involved in this. There's something else, though, I think that we should talk about, which is that it's very real. When you're with somebody who's dying, all the nonsense, all the bullshit is gone. Yeah. And you're just there in a very real way with people. The conversation gets really honest, And I wanted to be around that. I wanted to be around that kind of integrity, honesty, realness. So who knows how do any of us get to the place where we are? It's a meandering path, probably. But for myself, I know that because of my early life, and it was a painful one, I had to learn how to turn toward that pain. I had to learn how to turn toward it, as opposed to running away from it, which is how I spent most of my 20s. And when I realized when I turned toward it, I could heal. I could find some I could find some way through. And I began to see that that's what people needed at the end of life, was somebody who wasn't afraid to be with them, somebody who was willing to turn toward the experience that they were in the midst of. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just even listening to, some of the emotion that comes out from your voice. I don't even know if you notice it, because I know you're kind of speaking all around the world and not just, getting the book out to people, but also the stories and the messages. But listening to it, I mean, I know for me, it definitely slows me down to think, what is, you're right. Like what is kind of bullshit, and what is real.
Yeah.
Right. And I can only imagine that when you've, kind of been around so many people kind of going through those last moments, would you say that, I mean, is it fair to ask? I mean, what were some of the, I guess, monumental kind of experiences that some of these individuals like gone through? What were maybe some of the realizations that they came to kind of at the end of their lives?
Well, I think maybe it's first helpful to understand that many of the people I worked with in San Francisco anyway, we worked with all stratas of society, but we started by working with people who lived on the streets, people who lived in single room occupancy hotels and park benches behind City Hall, And they were from cultures I didn't know, really, speaking languages I couldn't always understand. And some of them had a deep faith that carried them through their experience, and others had sworn off religion years ago, There was this man I remember that I worked with. He was a hemophiliac, and he contracted the HIV virus from a blood transfusion. But the year before that, he had disowned his gay son because he had AIDS. He pushed him out of the house. And now the father and the son were in twin beds, in a bedroom rather, being cared for by Agnes, the husband's wife, and the son's mother. Yeah. So they made this unbelievable reconciliation, partly because they were now facing the same destiny. Yeah. So I think that these were some of the folks that I work with, people who lived on the margins of society, not necessarily people who had a rich inner life or did meditation or went to retreats or any of those things, or necessarily were even successful in the world,
Yeah.
And for some of them, dying was a great gift. They made unbelievable reconciliations with long lost families, and they expressed love and forgiveness, those sorts of things. And some of them turned toward the wall and withdrawal, and they never came back again. But all of them, Jay, all of them were my teachers. These people invited me into their life, to their most vulnerable moments, and into their dying process. And in the course of that, they showed me how to live life. Yeah, how to live life.
Frank, it's pretty awesome just to know that you could be that person, for a lot of these people, disregarding whatever they accomplish or did not accomplish, or whatever walks of life that they're from, that you were there in the moments that actually mattered. Out of curiosity, what makes a Zen hospice kind of different than a hospice? I was just noticing that, and I thought, might as well ask.
Well, that's a really great question, and fundamentally, I don't know that, it looks so different on the surface. I mean,
sure.
People are still being cared for. They get the same medications as they would get in any hospice, et cetera. I think the difference is something you mentioned, which is there's a calm presence in the room, that one of the things that one studies in Zen practice is how to stabilize and how to calm the body, mind, and heart, but also how to step into life in a more fearless way, not to let one's fear stop us from our actions in the world. So that's one of the things that I think makes a difference. We weren't so scared to be with people in these terribly vulnerable, really scary moments. Yeah, that's part of what made it different, I think. One calm person in the room makes all the difference, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on, right? One calm person. I mean, it's not just in the time of dying, it's throughout the rest of our lives, right? Any situation, look, think of a business meeting even. One calm person makes a difference. And you can be that calm person. Regular people can be that calm person. And that's one of the things that we figured out how to help people develop, is their capacity to be that stable influence, Like when you move somebody from a bed to a chair and they're weak, you lend them your back, right? You lend them the strength of your arms and your legs and your back. But you can also lend people the stability of your mind. And you can open your heart in such a way that it might encourage them to do the same. Yeah.
Mm.
We can do that for each other. And we don't have to wait until the time of our dying to discover how to do that, right? So,
yeah, I mean, I love that because I always think, sometimes people, it's almost like they're waiting for life to give them a crisis, or we're waiting for sometimes the storm of our lives to appear before us before we're saying, hey, I'm gonna tap into the best version of myself now. I'm gonna have that sense of urgency. I'm gonna say what I want to say. I'm gonna be my most authentic version of myself. I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I just love that you bring so many of these little reminders along the way, because you get to see that for real.
Right.
When people are just right there in front of you.
That's what's so stunning about being with people who are dying, of course. But it's again what it has to show us about how to live our lives. I mean, to imagine that at the time of your dying, you're going to have the physical strength, the emotional stability, the mental clarity to do the work of a lifetime is a ridiculous gamble. Yeah. So don't wait until that time, right? Do it and work on it now. I mean, the habits of our life have a very strong momentum, right? And they carry through into the time of our dying. So the question that arises for me always is, well, what habits do you want to create? How do you want to live this life? I mean, the best preparation for death is a life fully lived, right? One that is not full of regret and hesitation, but rather one in which we step in with both feet, and live our life in a curious and responsible way. Yeah.
I love that, Frank. Would you say that doing all this work, I mean, was that kind of like the central motivation for you in terms of the 5 invitations? I love the way, by the way, I was telling you off records, kind of like one of my favorite books that I reference all the time, 4 Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz. And they're hard. They're really hard. But they're really simple. When I tell people and they've never heard of it, Frank, I'll say, hey, have you read the 4 Agreements? And it's really simple. You just gotta do what you say. You gotta, do your best. And people are like, where's the punchline? Right? It's almost like where's the sexiness behind it? And I know yours is quite different. But would you say was that kind of the motivation behind you putting the 5 invitations and sharing that with the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the basis or the genesis of the book was that I saw a lot of people coming to their death in a lot of fear and regret, and I thought we should do something about that. No. And I didn't think that was a matter of just changing the way in which we took care of people as they died. I thought it meant, well, we have to tell people about what people encounter at the time of their dying, so that they can live their life in a different way, so they don't come to their dying full of that kind of fear and that kind of regret. So that's the first thing. And as you say about Don's book, sometimes these things appear very simple on the surface, right? Don't wait, right? That sounds pretty simple. Right. But then when you kind of live into that, you don't just use it as a bumper sticker, right? Or put it on the refrigerator or something. You live into it. You start to see that has a lot of ramifications for how I live my life, So these, I want to call them slogans or invitations, were all given to me by people who were dying. And it's not that they said it in those exact words, but they showed me that this is what was most important. Yeah. And so I felt like part of my work also was to honor what I'd learned from them and to share that with the world, as a way for people to not only prepare for their dying, but to live their lives in a way that's adventurous, full of excitement, curiosity, etc. So let's talk about them for a minute. Let's talk about don't wait. I mean, that sounds pretty simple, right? Don't wait. Waiting for the next moment, we miss this one. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, Jay, I've been with a family who've said, when is mom going to die? And waiting for the moment of mom's death, we miss all the moments in between. Yeah. So waiting.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that waiting, when we're waiting, we're full of expectation or procrastination, right? We're not really, we're not living as immediately as we possibly could, I think. And so, don't wait to do the things in your life that you really love. And this isn't just about getting all the toys you can get or having the most adventures. It means if there's somebody you love, tell them you love them now. Yeah. Don't wait.
And I think it's such a powerful exercise. What I was going to say is you see a lot of this in personal development. I'd say almost more so traditional personal development. Nothing necessarily wrong with it, but like for a lot of times in goal setting. right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I can't wait for, I know I'm going to be good when I have this level of income. I know I'm going to be good when, our company is doing X amount in revenues, right? I know I'm going to be good when, this one thing, that I need in my life happens. And it's not to say that you can, achieve and be an overnight success, but it's to, a lot of times I find that we delay ourselves.
Yeah.
The things that we most want to do because we think we have to get to a certain area before we do them, and a great example of just calling someone and telling them, how you feel, whether it's love or whether it's forgiveness or and it's taking that action now. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not waiting for the plan and the perfect details. And cause it's almost like it's never going to happen, the perfect scenario.
Yeah, exactly. And, if we base our happiness, and our enjoyment of life only on conditions, only on getting all the conditions right, then we're up the creek without a paddle because, the reality is the conditions are going to keep changing. I mean, that's the one thing we can be sure of, that everything is going to come and go, everything continually changing. So embracing that truth that things inevitably will change encourages us not to wait in order to begin to really live our life in a way that matters, right? That's deeply engaged. We stop wasting our lives on meaningless activities, and we learn not to hold our opinions and our ideas about ourselves so tightly, and we let go a little bit more easily, I think. And instead of pinning our hopes, on a future, we focus on the present, and we're grateful for what we have right in front of us right now. We say, I love you more often. So I think don't wait is a kind of pathway to fulfillment and an antidote to regret. Yeah.
It's like, I love how simple it is. It's almost like a war cry. You know what I mean? It's just like the war cry of people being present, being grateful. I absolutely love it. Before we jump to the second one, I just want to remind people that are watching this, that are listening to this, make sure to pick up a copy. And you can probably get it right now if you're in the computer or on the computer. The 5 invitations. I'll be sure to link it to Amazon. I got the Kindle copy. And so you guys can follow right along as we go through all 5 of these. But they're powerful, as you guys can tell. We could probably do an episode on each one. And the themes, very, very simple. But, we've said many times on this show, common sense is not common practice. And
That's a great slogan.
Yeah, and don't wait. I mean, it's I love it. It's happening right now. So what is, how does that transition maybe into the second one?
So there's 5 invitations. The first one is don't wait, right? So that it's not just about living life with urgency. It's living life with a kind of immediacy and a kind of quality of presence with whatever we're engaged in. The second one is welcome everything, push away nothing. Now that sounds really good. That would make a great bumper sticker, right?
That would, yeah.
Welcome everything, push away nothing. But how do you do that, right? So you have to see that when I say welcome, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with what's going on. It doesn't mean that you have to like it even. It just means you have to be willing to meet it. It's at your doorstep, so are you willing to meet it and see what it has to teach you? And that takes courage, right? So, James Baldwin, the great African-American writer, said, there are many things in life that we must face that we cannot change. But we cannot change anything if we're unwilling to face it, right? So that means that to welcome it, it means it's here. It's at my doorstep. I want to know about it. So here's an example. A friend of mine went to dinner at a friend of theirs' house. It was an older couple. The man had Alzheimer's disease, and he couldn't remember people's faces and names and such. So he opens the door when they ring the bell. He opens the door and he looks a bit blank, and he looks at my friends and he says, "I'm sorry, I can't remember your names and I don't recognize you, but I do know that this is my house." And I know that there's always been a house that is always welcome to people. And so if you're standing on my doorstep, I know that my job is to welcome you in. Please come in. Yeah.
Wow.
It's beautiful, like sort of story,
Yeah.
So suppose we did that with our life. Again, doesn't mean we have to like it or agree with it or that we won't, we don't make an attempt to make changes in our life. It's not about becoming a doormat. It is, though, about saying, okay, whatever's here, I'm willing to see it because I don't know what it is that's going to really wake me up in my life. I don't know what it is that's really going to change me in my life, right? So I got to be open to everything. Yeah. That's the genesis, or that's the basis of this particular invitation. Welcome everything, push away nothing. Yeah.
And you know what comes up for me, Frank, which I love. It's not like we scripted this, but you know, as we're going through this, I love what you know. I love to hear what comes up for you and what comes up for me. And as people are watching this, please let us know in the comment section. But for me, it's like welcome everything and push away nothing. It goes back to listening.
For a second.
Oh, I think we're back. Maybe it was just like a quick. Can you still see me? Hear me?
Yeah, we're fine. We just had a little blip there. Okay.
Okay. What came up for me was intuition, right?
Yeah.
Honoring that part of you, honoring what comes up for you.
So how do you know that? How do you know an intuitive moment? What's your experience? I'm curious. I'm going to be the interviewer here for a moment.
Yeah.
Like when you feel an intuitive flash, let's call it. How do you know it?
Okay, intuition. Like this has just been. I've just tried to look back because actually, my first thoughts were, I'm not too sure. You know, I don't know if I can pinpoint a distinction, but I know for me, I look back at moments where it was more intuition than logical, decision making. If I can make it, like I made a decision to leave the job I was at one time to go traveling and vagabond all across Asia.
Beautiful.
Made no sense. Like literally made no sense on paper. Try to make sense of it. Asian traditional parents, so try to rationalize backwards. Maybe learn Mandarin. There's all these things that I said, but at the root of it was I felt compelled that I need to go. I just felt pulled more than it made any sense. And
you're describing it beautifully.
Right. Yeah. And there's just so many times that I look at, every time that happens, like a scenario kind of, it almost like feels like that, where I felt pulled. And I guess I take it as a sign as that's intuition over the rational mind.
Yeah, beautiful. That's a great description. Really great description. So the reason I brought it up is that the words you used is I feel pulled. So there's some kind of emotional affect. I feel it. Yeah, and then there's some kind of energetic, like there's a pull. And like a lot of people, myself included, often when we feel intuition, it's not really an experience of the head. It's more like a gut feeling, right? You feel it like a gut sense, like I'm going to do this. Yeah. And there's a kind of commitment to it that isn't really based, as you say, on logic or on our cognitive adding up and assessing the situation. So when I'm working with people who are caregivers, for example, when I'm teaching docs and nurses how to be caregivers, one of the things I talk to them about is how to learn to listen from their heads, like, listen for the storyline, the content, to develop clarity and wisdom, et cetera. And I ask them to listen from their hearts, to develop their altruism, compassion, empathy. Then I ask them to listen from their body also, because I want them to cultivate their capacity for presence, but also intuition. Intuition is a gut feeling. So when we're functioning in the world, if we learn to really function from all three of those centers, and we got them all firing in a way, not just in listening, but in acting in the world, then we're a much more complete human being. Most of the things, the big changes in our life, like what you were describing, they don't come as a result of our deductions and our analysis. They come directly, immediately. Yeah. And we begin to learn to trust that. We have confidence. And then we can check out that intuition by assessing it. But the motivation, the impetus comes from, it's a gut feeling, right?
I love it.
So
I love it.
That's how I got into this work. It was a gut feeling. Yeah.
It goes all the way back to my first question, right? So
absolutely.
I love it. Don't wait, welcome everything and push
away nothing.
Push away nothing, right?
Yeah. Third one?
Third one.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No. I was going to say the third one, is it the bring your whole self?
Bring your whole self to the experience. Now, what the hell does that mean, right? One of the things that I've learned in being with folks who are dying was that all the ways they've defined themselves, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a Buddhist teacher, whatever it is, all of those identities are either stripped away by illness or they're gracefully given up, but they all go. And then we get down to something much more fundamental, more essential. Who am I now? Look, we all like to look good, right? We like to appear good. We want to put forth a great, self-image. We want to appear capable, intelligent, et cetera, or at least not so screwed up as we recognize that most of us are.
Sure.
So we've spent so much time building that image and conveying that, trying to transmit that to the world, that very few of us want to be known for our weakness or our helplessness or our fear. But actually, what I've found in my life is that those things that I want to hide from, actually oftentimes are my greatest assets. They're the things that enable me to connect with other people in a real way. Yeah. So to being your whole self doesn't mean to be perfect. It's not to keep polishing the jewel. It means no part of you is left out. Yeah. You get to be a whole human being. Yeah. And it doesn't matter where you're doing that, whether you're in the office, in a tech company, or you're on the road, traveling as a vagabond. You get to be your whole self. Yeah. And when you do that, you don't live life with so much regret. You're not putting your life off. You're not trying to be somebody else to be someone else to please someone else. Yeah.
It's just so honest. Even just, this whole experience, right, with like all the technology failing and what have you, and it's like, well, that's kind of like that's kind of what happens, like when you're trying to put these things together, and it's not perfect, and my handwriting sucks. I can't really read it sometimes, and it's not always perfect. And one of the things that I've come to learn, it's our mess becomes our message. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times
that's great. Yeah.
Right. And
so how does that work in your life? I'm curious. How does your mess become the message?
Well, I think, and it's funny because I help other, business owners and aspiring podcasters now launch podcasts. And a lot of times I'll get asked this question, Frank, which is, hey, Jay, how do I not sound silly or stupid or like go on rambling? And a lot of it comes down to the root of the root of it is that they sometimes don't believe that there's value in what they bring to the table, and value in their story and their perspectives. And through this whole journey, I've found that the more you're willing to share about some of the things that are happening to you in real life, the more it's easier to sometimes even connect that to everybody else, because everyone else is human and they also have faults, and they've also might have endured something worse. Maybe maybe theirs wasn't as bad. Right. And that it goes back to your mess becomes your message.
Yeah. Beautiful.
It's just how you leverage and how you see those things that happen.
Yeah. Right. You get to be yourself because everybody else is taken. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
My daughter and I, she likes to shop in consignment stores. Right. Yeah. Find a great paisley scarf, cool pair of heels, leather jacket. And so I help her, I go there with her. And while she's in the dressing room changing things, I go out and look around the racks and see if I can find the next cool thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we're in this one store and I see this price tag and it says $9.95 as is. $9.95 as is.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's fantastic. We should get those tags for ourselves and each other,
Yeah.
As is. I take you as is. What a gift. What an incredibly, welcoming, kind, way to regard ourselves and each other. As is, as you are. It doesn't mean that, you're perfect as is and there's always room for improvement, we would say, of course you're going to keep growing and cultivating, but that change only comes about by a great deal of self-acceptance, And then, once we accept where we are, then we can make some change. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think whether we're working with the dying or working in business or doing a podcast, that's true.
Yeah. Hey, Frank, I got to point out before we get to the last two, I think at some point you should start like a Shopify merchandising store, like Don't Wait would make a great t-shirt.
I think it's great.
Maybe we can have a chat after this.
Okay. I think we should go into business together. I think
there you go. And then, the idea of like, come as you are, right. Or as is, I think that's a great gift. Yeah. So I love this. Don't wait. Welcome everything. Push away nothing and bring your whole self to the experience. Honestly, for people that are listening and watching this, just don't even think about all five. Like one.
Yeah.
If you could just do one, and I'm not perfect by any means at doing all of them. And I don't think anyone is. It's just, can you get better at doing these and integrating them in your life? Very, very exciting, Frank.
I think, that one of the basis for this, for wanting even to do that, comes from an understanding that things are constantly changing. That everything arises and passes away. You know, everything's coming and going all the time.
Yeah.
And we can either fight against that truth or we can align ourselves with that truth. And I think when we do, when we have more alignment with that truth, more attunement with it, we live happier lives. But if we're always trying to manage the conditions in order to get happy, we're in trouble, because those conditions are constantly changing. I mean, I used to have blonde hair, you know, I don't anymore. Yeah. Things are changing all the time, right? And so what happens if we align ourselves with that? What happens if we start to see that's the way of the world? And let's relax a little bit. Let's see what we can learn from that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Frank, I have to say this because I do want us to get to the fourth one and the fifth one, but I was listening to, this is like an older, I imagine like a CD program or tape by Wayne Dyer. But I have like the MP3 version of it. And I think it's the talk where he says, it's like a no limit person talk. It's like how to be a no limit person. Anyways, he shares a story of, him going bald and like coming to terms with like losing his hair. And he was like, you know, my daughter helped me with this. And he goes, you know, Dad, it's not like you lost your hair. It's you outgrew your hair. And he's like, and then he's like, are you saying that I transcended my hair? Right. And Wayne Dyer is this like spiritual, you know, teacher for people that don't know who he is. I just thought that was really funny. So I just thought about that.
Just, you know, I mean, really what that comes down to is just, I take myself as is. That's bring your whole self to the experience, you know. When I was younger, when my kids were younger, I had 2 twin boys. Yeah. And we used to take photographs of them and then put a puzzle puncher over the photograph. And then they would reassemble their faces. And sometimes we'd mix up these 2 twin boys and see if they could put the puzzle together. Well, imagine if we could take a picture of ourselves, Jay. And it wasn't just of our faces or bodies, but it was our whole being, you know, our souls, if you will. And then, you know, we went to put the puzzle back together again, and there would be parts of ourselves that we didn't like so much. Maybe we didn't like our anger, or we were tired of our grief, or we wanted to get over our fear. And we wanted to leave those parts out. And if we did, we wouldn't recognize ourselves, you know, because we wouldn't be looking at a whole picture. We'd be looking at a very fragmented picture of who we are. So to be whole is to invite it all in. Yeah. To be complete is to invite it all in, you know, no part left out. That's what we say, no part left out. It's not about being perfect, no part left out.
And that is what bringing your whole self to the experience means, right? Literally, you bring the good and the bad and you showcase it to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. No more hiding.
Absolutely love that. So Frank, what are these infamous last two?
The last one is fourth one is find a place of rest in the middle of things. You know, we always think we're going to find rest when we go on a holiday or when we get our list checked off, or our email box is empty. My email box has never been empty, you know, and my list is never checked off. And so if I wait for that, I'm going to be exhausted. You know? So I have to find a way of resting right in the middle of what I'm doing, even now as we're talking, right? So I do that by bringing my attention fully and completely to whatever it is I'm doing. And when I do that, I actually find a place of rest. So here's an example. I was with this woman, 86-year-old Russian Jewish lady, really tough as nails, and she was dying. And they called me up, and I went into the hospice at 3 a.m, and she was sitting on the edge of the bed, breathing with great difficulty, despite all our correct interventions. And I just sat on the couch and I watched for a moment, and I could see her, you know, breathing with difficulty. There's a labor to dying, just like there's a labor to getting born. And there was a very well-meaning attendant who was next to her, and she said to her, "You don't have to be frightened. I'm right here with you." And the woman turned to her, her name was Adele. Adele turned to her and she said, "Honey, if this was happening to you, you'd be frightened." Right? So she was really honest. And then a little bit later, the attendant said to her, "Would you like a blanket or a shawl? You look a little cold." And so the woman, you know, Adele turned to her and she said, "Of course I'm cold. I'm almost dead." Right? Wow. I mean, I hope I have half the tenacity of this woman when I'm done.
Yeah.
So I saw 2 things very quickly. I saw that one was she didn't want any nonsense. She didn't want to talk about tunnels of light or any of this stuff. She wanted real relationship, right? She knew what was happening for her and she wanted somebody to be real with her. And the second was that there was a labor. There was a struggle. So I sat up right in front of her, as I am with you, and I said, "Hey, would you like to struggle a little less?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, I noticed something right there at the end of your exhale. There's a little gap before the next inhale. And I said, I wonder what it'd be like if you could put your attention there for a moment. I'll do it with you. I'll breathe with you. Now, she didn't care beans about Buddhism or meditation or any of these things, but she's highly motivated to be free of suffering in that moment. So she said, okay. And so as she would breathe in, I would breathe in. As she would breathe out, I would breathe out. As she did this, as she put her attention in that gap, the fear in her face just drained away. She relaxed. And then she said to me, I'm going to lay back on my pillow now. And a few minutes later, she died very peacefully. Wow. I think she found a place of rest in the middle of things. Do you understand? Like everything was still happening. She was still dying. There was still shortness of breath. She didn't manage any of those conditions. She just found a way of resting right in the middle of them. Yeah. And we can do that in our lives. We can find a way of being present, available to ourselves and others, right in the middle, even of chaos. Yeah. So to find a place of rest, in the middle of things is about that. It's about not imagining that it's going to all work when we get the conditions lined up perfectly. You know, it's available to us right now. When you're reading a book, when you're making love, when you're, having a moment in nature, you understand what that's like, right? When you're totally there. Yeah. When my daughter was in school, they invited me to the school to teach meditation. And I went to the school, and the first class I taught sort of, in a traditional way. Second class, and they all fell asleep. Second class, I taught, and I said, I want to teach you how to kiss. They're 7th and 8th graders. I want to teach you how to kiss. I said, if you're kissing someone, you want to be there for it. You don't want to miss that moment.
Yeah.
And it became very popular. Everybody wanted to meditate.
Yeah, you got voted like teacher of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
So find a place of rest right in the middle of things.
Yeah. I imagine that being a very difficult one for people to stomach, and not just to wrap themselves around, because we're in such a go.
Yeah.
Most everybody that I know in North America, everybody's in this go type of mentality. What's the next thing? Hustling, cross off the checklist, dopamine levels are all crazy, want to go make, X amount of money, want to go change the world, right? Like it's this energy and finding that place of rest. I know personally it's difficult for me, but I think it's so profound,
I worked with a guy who's the head of I can't say which company, a multi-billion-dollar Silicon Valley company, one of the biggest. Okay. And his job was to sit in a boardroom and have teams come in and report to him. Yeah. And he did this all day and made decisions. And he was having all kinds of stress issues, physical issues and like, and so he sought me out. Mm. And I said, well, when do you pee? And he said, I don't have to. And I said, okay, we're going to make a new rule. Every hour, you're going to get up to pee. And you're going to walk down to the toilet, and you're going to go in the stall, and you're going to sit there for a few moments. Mm. And the stall became his like little meditation center. It was like his little hut. And he just learned to learn how to not just create a boundary, but how to learn to find rest right in the middle of his activity. Yeah. It isn't always about creating a new thing. When you read a book and you get really absorbed in it, you find some rest, right?
Yep. Kind of rejuvenates you.
Absolutely.
Through the act, right?
Every time you bring your attention back to the present moment, you get rejuvenated. When we're distracted all the time, we exhaust ourselves. There's a phenomenon that happens when people are diagnosed with cancer that's useful for the rest of our lives. Oftentimes, after they get through the initial shock and disbelief, there's just something that arises, which a friend of mine calls a secret gratitude. And the secret gratitude is, I have cancer now. I can say no to stuff. I say yes to the things I really want to say yes to, and I say no to the things I don't want to do anymore. Mm. We don't have to get cancer. We don't have to die to rest in peace. Yeah. We can do that now. We can make those choices in our life now. So find a place of rest right now.
Find a place of rest. Don't wait. Welcome everything. Push away nothing. Bring your whole self to the experience and finding a place of rest in the middle of things.
Yeah. There's one more. The fifth one is cultivate don't know mind. That sounds very Zen-like. I felt obliged to put something like that in the list. Don't know mind isn't ignorance. Ignorance is I know something, but it's the wrong thing and I insist on it. There's a lot of that going on in the culture right now.
Yeah.
Don't know mind is a mind of curiosity. It's openness. It's wonder. It's awe. It's not clobbering the current moment with all of your knowing from the past. It's holding on to your expertise, and having them in your back pocket in a way, but not letting it destroy the freshness of this moment. Yeah. So it's don't know mind is a mind that's fresh, ready, alive, curious. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, beginner's mindset, you know what I mean? Always improving, always being a student first, and trying to look at things, from not just your own personal opinions of the matter. And that's partially why I like to have different caliber of guests, come on. It's not just all the time about, hey, we had a successful startup and we sold it for $100 million. And it's like, well, that's one way, of doing and being successful. And that's one version of it. But I mean, so many of the things that we've talked about over and over again, it's these principles, these invitations. I love that word, by the way. Frank is inviting you, to put and do any of these in your life. And I almost could promise you, if you do, you're going to be able to be significantly more present, which leads to you being significantly more happy.
And effective, I'd say, in the world as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Frank, I know you're speaking all around the world, and I appreciate you sharing all these 5 invitations with us. Once again, I invite our listeners and people that are watching this to pick up a copy of the book, because I think it's really awesome to have something there to reference all the time. Has it ever, I thought about this, and I didn't know how to work this one in, but I was like, I might as well ask him, because I speak, and I know you speak around the world, and I speak sometimes different places, usually like online marketing, podcasting, a little geekier and a little more head focused.
Hey, I'm going to go speak with the Young Presidents Club, the international thing in Singapore, in a couple of months. So I geek out all the time. Yeah.
Geeking out is cool. It is cool. They say public speaking is like the number 1 fear, right? And then they say dying is like the number 2 fear. I don't even know if it's true, right? I know you said in earlier in the interview that you kind of have this kind of relationship with death at a very young age. For people that are maybe listening to this, that are brave enough to kind of face their own mortality, or the idea that they're not going to live forever, which by the way is the reality, but how do you overcome that fear of death?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to just reframe it a little bit. Sure. I think that we often think about overcoming those experiences like we're going to get rid of them. In my experience, we don't actually get rid of our fear. What happens is we have a new relationship to it. And so we begin to see that fear, after a while, becoming familiar with fear is not the only thing in the room. Like when you're afraid, you're afraid, right? Yeah. That means it's part of you, the part of you that knows, that's aware of your fear, is not afraid. It's not afraid. And we can start orienting to that awareness, to that knowing, to that witnessing, we could say. And it's not that we have to push away the fear or overcome it or get rid of it. It's more like we give it a little bit of space, and whatever we give space to can move, and it can keep evolving and showing us, unfolding and showing us itself. But really what happens is we orient toward our capacity to be aware of it, to witness it. And then it doesn't have such a stranglehold on us. Yeah.
I love that. It's really about embracing some of these emotions, right? Goes right back to, bring your whole self, not to necessarily run away, but to go closer.
Right. And I mean, the idea of overcoming it is a bit counterphobic. You know what I mean? In other words, it's just a part of our human experience. Let's get to know it rather than overcome it. When you know something, you're not so scared of it anymore, right? Like, I've done this before. I know this. It doesn't have to rule my life. And so I've gotten familiar with death. And so it doesn't scare me so much anymore to be with people who are dying. It's not that I don't have any fear. It's that it's not the only thing in the room. It's one thing that's there that now becomes workable. Yeah. I haven't overcome it. I've just learned to make it workable.
I love that. And that can be applied to everything. That could be applied to every fear, whether it's public speaking or, fear of your own success or, anything. So once again, I do invite you guys listening, watching, go pick up a book, 5invitations.com. That is where I saw Frank's crazy speaking schedule. And I know he's going all around the world with this message. And we are totally honored to have you here for the last hour. Before we wrap up here, I got one kind of question for you. One last one.
Okay.
Kind of simple, but just wanted to hear what your thoughts would be. So the show, it's called Inner Changemaker, right? What's your definition, or what comes to mind for Frank when you think of the word changemaker?
Oh, well, that's really great. It's a really good question. I think that change happens. Change is just in the nature of life, right?
Yeah.
And, people can change and not necessarily mature very much. So I think there's a difference between change and transformation. And I think when you transform, you have an entirely different vantage point, than you had before. Change is just something that occurs in the activity of the world. So I'm interested in transformation. I'm interested in me growing, me changing, me transforming. Yeah. And I'm interested in supporting that with others. Yeah.
Well, Frank, I just want to take a few seconds and acknowledge you for being a great example of a leader, as well as a change maker. And, you definitely probably, I can easily say, transformed a lot of people's viewpoints on, whether it's on death or hospices. But just if people practice some of those invitations, of not waiting, of welcoming everything, of becoming your whole self and bringing that, showcasing that to the world, of finding a place of rest in the middle of chaos and everyday life, of being able of having a beginner's mindset, that don't know mentality. I think that's absolutely life-changing. And that's part of the reason why, we're absolutely honored to have you on the show and feature you as a change maker.
Thanks, Jay.
So thank you so much, Frank.
You're very welcome. Very, very welcome. And thank you for having the courage to have this conversation.
It was
the
scary.
world needs this. Yeah, it is scary.
It was scary.
It's really scary. So thank you for having the courage to have the conversation. Look, I called the book 5 Invitations because an invitation is a request for you to show up for something, for an event, like somebody's wedding, right? So these invitations are a request for you to show up for your life, right? That's what we're really asking, and so, or encouraging, I should say. So thank you for showing up for that, and for, engaging me and also your audience around what really matters.
Frank, there was you said a couple lines in there that was like, the invitation is meant for you, to invite you to show up for your life. Yeah. First thought, I was like, that would make another great t-shirt.
Okay, we got to talk offline about our new business.
We got to talk offline. So, hey, everybody that's watching, listening, we appreciate you. So much love for you guys. And pick up a copy of Frank's book, because it is a total game changer. And share this podcast. If you guys got any great ideas from this, let us know. I'll link to both of our social medias and what have you in the show notes. But until next time, guys, remember, it's not about changing the world. It's about becoming the most effective version of yourself in the moments that matter the most in life and in going towards death. So until next time, guys, we'll talk to you then.